I found out my boyfriend has been running a secret Instagram account where he tells women I'm his pathetic unemployed ex who won't move out. Not his girlfriend, not his partner, his EX. A deadbeat roommate he feels sorry for. And the absolute wildest part, he convinced me 6 months ago to delete all my social media because his company had this new security policy, and it would look bad if his girlfriend was posting online while he had to stay off everything. I actually believed him. I deleted Instagram, Facebook, everything, because I thought I was being supportive of his career. Turns out there was no company policy. There was just Brian, gym rat, mid-level sales rep who thought he was God's gift to women, maintaining a whole secret life online while I sat at home like an idiot with zero social media presence. My friend Jillian found it completely by accident. She was scrolling through Instagram last week and one of those suggested accounts popped up. You know how the algorithm works, showing you people based on mutual connections or whatever? She clicks on it and there's Brian. Brian, with his gym selfies and his flexing photos and his stories about being single and ready to mingle. She sent me screenshots and I literally thought she was pranking me at first. This had to be a fake account, right? Someone catfishing using his photos? But no, it was verified through mutual friends, same locations we'd been to, same gym he goes to every morning at 5 a.m., which I always thought was dedication to fitness, but now I'm realizing was probably dedication to filming thirst traps in the locker room mirror. The account had been active for at least 6 months, 6 months of carefully curated posts about his solo adventures and single life and focusing on myself. And here's where it gets so much worse. Remember those vacation photos we took in Miami back in March? The ones where we went to the beach and did that whole resort weekend for his birthday? Every single photo on his Instagram from that trip had me cropped out. Not just untagged, cropped out. There's this one photo where you can literally see my hand on his shoulder in the corner of the frame because he couldn't crop it out completely. The caption? Solo beach vibes. Nothing better than traveling alone and clearing your head. I was right there. We shared a king bed in that hotel room. I paid for half the trip. And he's posting about traveling alone. Jillian sent me probably 30 screenshots and I went through every single one trying to process what I was seeing. The comments were even worse. Girls flirting with him, asking where he lived, saying they should meet up. And he was responding. Not just liking comments, actually responding with flirty messages back. One girl commented asking if he had a girlfriend, and he replied, "I have this screenshot burned into my brain forever. Nah, I've got a roommate situation I'm dealing with, but nothing serious. She's nobody, just some unemployed loser I feel sorry for. Probably gonna kick her out soon, lol. Unemployed loser. For context, because I know someone's gonna ask, I'm not unemployed. I work part-time at a bookstore because I'm finishing my degree. I'm 26 and went back to school after taking a few years off. The bookstore job pays minimum wage. Yeah. But it works with my class schedule and I'm 3 months away from graduating. Brian knew this. He was supposedly supportive. He said he was proud of me for going back to school. Guess he was just tolerating me until he could find someone better. There was another comment thread where some girl asked about a woman's voice she heard in his Instagram stories, because apparently I'm in the background of some of his videos and you can hear me talking. His response? Oh, that's just my pathetic ex who won't move out. Total deadbeat. I'm working on getting rid of her. Pathetic ex who won't move out. We live together. We live together. In an apartment that I found, by the way. I was living there first, and he moved in 8 months ago, when his lease ended because it made financial sense. And we were serious about each other. The lease is in my name. He pays half the rent, but it's my apartment legally. But somehow in his version of reality, I'm the ex who won't leave his place. Jillian kept sending me more screenshots, and with each one, I felt like I was watching my entire relationship dissolve in real time. There were posts about him being finally free, and living his best single life, and done with toxic relationships. And the gym photos. So many gym photos. Shirtless bathroom selfies with captions about being focused on self-improvement and cutting dead weight from my life. The comments were always the same. Women telling him how hot he was, how they'd love to work out with him, asking if he wanted to grab drinks. He responded to basically all of them. Made plans to meet up with at least 3 different women that I could see in the DMs that Jillian managed to screenshot. Long story. But one of the girls who'd been messaging him was friends with Jillian's coworker, and showed her the conversation when she realized they were talking about the same Brian. In these messages, he was telling girls they should come over to his place. After, his roommate finally leaves for her minimum wage job in the morning. My morning shifts at the bookstore. He was literally timing hookups around my work schedule. I'm reading all of this while sitting on our couch. Sorry, his place, according to him, and trying to figure out what the actual hell was happening. How do you even process something like this? Your boyfriend hasn't just been cheating. He's been living a completely different reality where you don't exist as his partner. You're just some annoying obstacle he's trying to remove from his life. I didn't confront him immediately. I know some people are gonna say I should've, but I was in shock. I just sat there with all these screenshots on my phone, watching him come home from work that evening like everything was normal, asking me what we should order for dinner, complaining about his boss, being completely casual like he wasn't telling the entire internet that I was a deadbeat ex. That night, I barely slept. I kept looking at the photos, reading the comments, trying to understand how someone could be that two-faced. In bed next to me, he was scrolling on his phone, probably on that secret Instagram I wasn't supposed to know about, while I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, he got up for his 5 a.m. gym session like always. I heard him in the bathroom taking photos. The sounds are different when you know what you're listening for. He left and I laid there thinking about every morning he'd done this exact same routine for the past 6 months. Getting up early, going to the gym, taking thirst trap photos, posting them for other women, coming home to me like nothing happened. I went to work that day and couldn't concentrate on anything. My coworker Wendy asked if I was okay because I kept zoning out in the middle of helping customers. I didn't tell her what was going on because honestly, I didn't know how to explain it. How do you say, my boyfriend has a secret Instagram where he pretends I don't exist? After my shift ended, I sat in my car in the bookstore parking lot and went through everything again. Made sure I had all the screenshots saved. Went through the timeline of when he'd asked me to delete my social media versus when his account started getting active. Looked at every single post and comment and message. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to just confront him. I was going to be strategic about this. Because here's the thing. Brian thinks he's so smart. He thinks he's got everything figured out. He's been running this whole operation for 6 months. And in his mind, I'm too stupid or too broke or too dependent on him to do anything about it even if I found out. What are you gonna do? You can't even afford rent without me. Energy was radiating from every single one of those Instagram posts. The way he talked about me like I was some charity case he was stuck with. The way he'd positioned himself as this successful single guy who was too good for commitment. He really thought he had all the power here. So I started planning. And I'm not gonna lie. Some of you are probably gonna think I went too far with what I did. But honestly, after reading that I was a pathetic ex and an unemployed loser and a deadbeat who needed to be kicked out of his apartment, which again is literally my apartment, I stopped caring about going too far. I spent 3 days acting completely normal while I figured everything out. Made dinner with him, watched TV on the couch, listened to him talk about work. The whole time I'm just thinking about those Instagram posts and planning my next move. Okay, this is getting really long, so I'm gonna post an update soon with what happened next, because trust me, you wanna hear this part. Shout out to everyone who's been messaging me asking for updates. I see you and I'm getting there. Update. Okay, so a bunch of you have been asking what happened when I confronted Brian, and honestly, this is where things got absolutely insane. First, I want to address some comments I saw. Yes, I know legally he's a tenant and I can't just kick him out same day even though the lease is in my name. I'm not an idiot. But I also wasn't planning to play by normal breakup rules because this wasn't a normal breakup situation. This was a man who'd been publicly humiliating me online for 6 months while using my apartment as his personal hookup spot. So anyway, that third day, I waited until he got home from work, around 6 p.m. like usual. He walked in all relaxed, threw his gym bag by the door, that damn gym bag that I now knew was full of outfit changes for his Instagram photos, and asked what I wanted to do for dinner like it was just another day. I was sitting on the couch with my laptop open. I'd spent the afternoon making a very special PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, you read that right. A PowerPoint, with screenshots of every single Instagram post, every comment, every DM that Jillian had managed to get, organized by date with timestamps and everything. I told him we needed to talk and he should probably sit down. He got this confused look on his face but sat down in the armchair across from me. He asked what was going on, and I just turned my laptop around so he could see the screen. The first slide was titled, Brian's Secret Life, with his Instagram handle in big letters and his profile picture, one of those shirtless gym selfies where he's flexing in the mirror. I wish I could describe the look on his face. It went from confusion to recognition to absolute panic in about 3 seconds. He started to say something, but I held up my hand and told him no. He was going to shut up and look at every single slide before he said anything, so I made him sit there while I clicked through the entire presentation. Every cropped vacation photo, every comment where he called me a deadbeat, every message where he invited women over during my work hours, the one where he said I was his pathetic ex who wouldn't move out, all of it. By slide 15, he was trying to interrupt, saying I needed to let him explain that it wasn't what it looked like, that I was taking things out of context. I just kept clicking through slides. Slide 20 showed the comment thread where he told some girl named Jessica that his roommate situation would be resolved soon, and she should come visit. When I finally finished the presentation, 37 slides total, I counted, I closed the laptop and just looked at him. He immediately went into damage control mode, started talking fast about how the Instagram was just for fun, how he never actually met up with any of those women, how the comments didn't mean anything, how I was overreacting to what was basically just social media, and everyone exaggerates online. I asked him about the company's security policy that made me delete all my social media. He stuttered for a second and then said his company DI'd have concerns about employees' online presence, and he was just trying to protect both of us. When I pointed out that he had an active Instagram account while supposedly being under this policy, he said it was different because he was in sales and needed social media for networking. Networking. He called posting shirtless gym selfies and telling women I was a deadbeat networking. Then he tried a different approach. He said the account was from before we got serious and he just never deleted it. He claimed he barely used it anymore and those comments were all old. I pulled up my phone and showed him a comment from 3 days ago, where he responded to a girl asking if he was single and he said yeah, completely single and loving it. That's when he started getting defensive instead of apologetic. He said I had no right to go through his social media and that having a private Instagram account wasn't cheating. He said a lot of people have separate accounts for different parts of their lives and I was being controlling by making this into a huge deal. I reminded him that I wouldn't even know about his private account if I still had my own social media, which he convinced me to delete under false pretenses. He said that was a separate issue and I was conflating two different things. We went back and forth like this for probably an hour. Every time I brought up something specific, the cropped photos, calling me unemployed, inviting women over, he had some explanation that somehow made it not as bad as it seemed. The photos were cropped for aesthetic composition. He was venting about our relationship to friends online, which everyone does. He never actually had anyone over and it was just talk. But here's what really got me. He kept circling back to this idea that I was being crazy and irrational. He said I was letting my friend get in my head and turn something harmless into a relationship-ending crisis. He said Jillian probably had her own agenda and wanted to break us up. He said I needed to calm down and think logically about this instead of letting my emotions control me. The audacity. This man had been running a secret Instagram for 6 months where he pretended to be single, and I was the one being irrational? I told him he had 24 hours to move out. Just said it flat out. 24 hours. Pack your trash and leave. That's when he completely switched tactics. Suddenly he was apologizing, saying he made a huge mistake, that he'd delete the Instagram immediately, that we could work through this. He said he loved me and he didn't want to throw away years over some stupid social media account. He actually started tearing up, talking about how much I meant to him and how scared he was of losing me. And for like 30 seconds, I almost believed him. Because that's the thing about someone you've been with for 3 years. You want to believe them when they say they're sorry. You want to think the person you fell in love with is still in there somewhere. But then I remembered that comment. Total deadbeat. I'm working on getting rid of her. And the tears didn't matter. I told him the apology would have meant something if I'd found out about this 2 weeks in, not 6 months in. 6 months of lying, 6 months of humiliating me online, 6 months of planning hookups during my work shifts. That's not a mistake, that's a whole separate life. He kept trying to argue, saying I couldn't just kick him out because he lived here too and paid rent. I reminded him the lease was in my name and legally I had options. He said he'd refuse to leave and I'd have to go through formal eviction, which would take months. So I told him fine, don't leave. But I was calling his mother. This is where I need to give some backstory. Brian's mother Marjorie is extremely Catholic, extremely traditional, and thinks Brian walks on water. She's always been kind of cold to me because she doesn't think anyone is good enough for her precious son. But she also has very strong opinions about how relationships should work, and lying is basically the worst sin you can commit in her book. Brian went pale when I said I was calling Marjorie. He told me I wouldn't dare because that was manipulative and bringing parents into a relationship issue was immature. I picked up my phone and started scrolling for her contact. He tried to grab my phone, but I moved away and told him if he touched me or my phone, I'd call the cops before I called his mother. He backed off but kept saying I was being ridiculous, that his mother had nothing to do with this, that I was just trying to hurt him now instead of actually dealing with our problems. I said no, I was going to make sure everyone in his life knew exactly who he really was since he'd been working so hard to make sure everyone in his online life knew who I supposedly was. I called Marjorie right there on speakerphone. She answered all cheerful asking how I was doing, and I told her I was doing terrible actually because I needed to tell her something about Brian and she should probably be sitting down. Brian was frantically whispering at me to hang up, that I was making a huge mistake, but I ignored him. I told Marjorie everything, the secret Instagram, the post calling me a deadbeat and an ex, the fake company policy that made me delete my social media, the women he was messaging, the invitations to come over during my work hours, all of it. There was silence on the other end for a solid 10 seconds, and then Marjorie asked to speak to Brian. He took the phone off speaker and walked into the bedroom. I could hear him through the door trying to explain, saying I was exaggerating, that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was having some kind of episode, and believing things that weren't true. Marjorie's voice came through the door loud enough that I could hear her asking him to explain the screenshots then, explain the comments, explain why he lied about the company policy. The conversation went on for maybe 20 minutes. When Brian came back out, he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He handed me the phone, and Marjorie asked me if I had somewhere else to stay tonight because she was coming over tomorrow morning, and she expected Brian to be packed and ready to leave with her. I told her I wasn't going anywhere because this was my apartment. There was another pause, and then she said she'd be there at 10 a.m., and Brian better be ready to explain himself to his father too. After I hung up, Brian just stood there staring at me. He said I'd just ruined his relationship with his parents over a fight about social media. He said I was vindictive and cruel, and he couldn't believe I'd stoop that low. I told him he could sleep on the street and tomorrow he'd be leaving with his mother like she said. He tried to argue more, but I went into the bedroom and locked the door. I barely slept that night. I kept hearing him moving around in the living room, kept expecting him to try to knock on the bedroom door and keep arguing, but he didn't. The next morning I woke up around 8 a.m. and came out to find him aggressively shoving stuff into duffel bags. He wouldn't look at me. just kept packing in angry silence while I made coffee in the kitchen. Around 9:30, his phone started ringing. He looked at it and ignored the call. It rang again and again. Finally, he answered, and I heard him say, "Mom, I'm almost ready. You don't need to come up." But apparently, Marjorie wasn't taking no for an answer, because 10 minutes later, there was knocking on the door. I answered it, and Marjorie walked in looking like she was dressed for war. She was in this burgundy pantsuit with her hair done all perfect, and her face was set in this expression that clearly said someone was about to get lectured into next week. She nodded at me politely and then turned to Brian and asked if he had everything packed. And here's where things took another turn, because Brian's father, Randall, was standing in the hallway behind her. Okay, I have to split this into another update because this is getting super long, and what happened next with his parents was wild. Stay tuned because you're not gonna believe where this goes. Final update. Okay, so I'm writing this from my friend Jillian's house because I needed to get out of my apartment for a few days while everything settles down, and holy hell, you guys, the last few days have been absolutely unhinged. So where I left off, Marjorie showed up at 10 a.m. in her burgundy power suit looking ready to destroy someone's entire existence, and Brian's dad, Randall, was standing behind her in the hallway. Randall is this quiet guy who lets Marjorie do most of the talking, but when he does talk, people listen. He's got this whole disappointed dad energy that's somehow worse than yelling. They both came into my apartment, and Marjorie told Brian to finish packing while she and Randall talked to me in the kitchen. She asked if I had copies of everything I'd told her about on the phone, and I showed her the screenshots on my laptop. She went through every single one with this expression that got darker and darker, and Randall looked over her shoulder reading the comments where Brian called me a deadbeat and a pathetic ex. When they finished looking, Marjorie closed the laptop and asked me how long this had been going on. I told her at least 6 months that I knew of, probably longer. She asked if Brian had actually brought other women to the apartment, and I said I didn't know for sure, but he'd been trying to based on the messages. Randall asked why Brian had me delete my social media, and I explained the fake company policy. He got this look on his face and said that didn't make any sense because Brian's company doesn't have social media restrictions for sales staff. They actually encourage it for networking. He would know because he has a friend who works in Brian's department. This was news to me, and I said as much. Randall said the whole story sounded fabricated, and he wanted to hear Brian's explanation directly. They called Brian into the kitchen, and Marjorie asked him to explain the company policy that required me to delete my social media. Brian started spinning this story about how his manager had mentioned that significant others posting online could create liability issues, and he was just being cautious and protecting both of us. Randall cut him off and asked which manager said this. Brian named his direct supervisor, some guy named Tom. Randall pulled out his phone and said he was going to call Tom right now and verify this policy. Brian panicked. He said that wasn't necessary, that maybe he'd misunderstood what Tom said, that it might not have been an official policy, but more like a suggestion. Marjorie asked him why he'd present a suggestion as a mandatory policy that required me to delete all my social media accounts. Brian tried to say he was just being overprotective, and I was reading too much into how he'd phrased things. I jumped in and said no. He specifically told me it was a company requirement, and if I didn't comply, it could affect his job. I asked him to explain why he needed me to have zero online presence while he was running an Instagram account telling everyone he was single. That's when Brian switched to being defensive again. He said the Instagram was private and I never would have known about it if my friend hadn't gone snooping. He said I was violating his privacy by looking at his social media without permission. Marjorie asked him if he seriously thought privacy was the issue here, when he'd been publicly calling me names and lying about our relationship status online. She asked him what he thought would happen when I eventually found out, because lies like this always come out eventually. Brian said he was planning to delete the account, that he'd just gotten caught up in the attention and validation from other women, and it spiraled out of control. He said he never meant for it to go this far, and he was going to end it before I found out. Randall asked when exactly he was planning to end it. Brian said soon. He'd been thinking about it for a while. Randall said that was interesting because the comments were from 3 days ago, which doesn't sound like someone planning to stop. The conversation went in circles like this for over an hour. Every time Brian gave an explanation, his parents would poke holes in it with specific questions. Every time he tried to minimize what he'd done, I'd bring up another screenshot or comment that proved it was worse than he was admitting. At one point, Marjorie asked him directly if he'd been unfaithful. Brian swore he hadn't actually cheated, that all the messages were just talk and he never followed through. Randall asked why they should believe him when he'd been lying about everything else for 6 months. Brian started getting agitated and said everyone was ganging up on him and not letting him explain. He said he made mistakes, but I was dragging his parents into it to punish him, instead of trying to work things out like adults. He looked at me and said I was being vindictive and trying to turn his family against him. I told him I didn't need to turn anyone against him. His own actions did that. I said I called his mother because he tried to claim he could refuse to leave my apartment, and I wanted his family to know the kind of person he really was before he spun some victim story about his crazy ex-girlfriend. Marjorie asked what he meant about refusing to leave, and Brian said I was trying to illegally kick him out without proper notice. I clarified that he'd been living here 8 months and paying half the rent, but the lease was solely in my name. And after discovering he'd been planning to have other women over in my home, I wanted him gone immediately. Randall said they were taking him home with them today regardless, and he could figure out his living situation from there. Brian tried to argue that he had work and couldn't just leave, but Randall said he could call in sick for a few days while they sorted this mess out. That's when things got even more complicated, because Brian's phone kept buzzing during this whole conversation. Finally, Marjorie told him to answer it or turn it off because it was interrupting. He looked at the screen and his face went weird and he said it was just work stuff. He'd deal with it later. But his phone kept ringing. After the fourth call, Randall just took the phone from Brian's hand and answered it himself. It was Brian's manager, Tom, the same Tom who allegedly instituted the social media policy. Randall put it on speaker and Tom was asking Brian why he wasn't at the client meeting that started 30 minutes ago. This was the second time this month he'd no-showed an important meeting, and if he didn't have a good explanation, he needed to come to the office immediately to discuss his future with the company. And this is where Randall absolutely destroyed Brian's entire world, and I got to watch every beautiful second of it. Randall told Tom that Brian wouldn't be working there anymore, period. Tom sounded confused and asked if this was really Brian's father and what was going on. Randall said yes, this was his father, and Brian had some serious personal issues to deal with that made it clear he wasn't mature enough to handle a professional office job. Tom started saying something about proper notice and exit procedures, but Randall cut him off and said Brian would send a formal resignation by the end of the day. Tom asked to speak to Brian directly, and Randall said no. Brian had made enough poor decisions lately, and Randall was making this one for him. Brian tried to grab the phone, but Randall held it away and told Tom he appreciated the company giving Brian a chance, but it was clear Brian needed to learn some basic responsibility before he could handle a desk job. He said he'd already found Brian a new position that was more appropriate for his current level of maturity, working sanitation for the city. There was silence on the other end, and then Tom said something like, "Oh, well, good luck with that," and hung up. Brian absolutely lost it. He was yelling about how Randall had no right to quit his job for him, how he was a grown man who could make his own decisions, how this was insane and controlling and he wasn't going to accept it. Randall just looked at him with this ice-cold expression and said, if Brian wanted to act like a grown man, he should have done that before spending 6 months lying to everyone and publicly humiliating his girlfriend online. He said grown men don't create fake personas on social media to get attention from other women. Grown men don't manipulate their partners into deleting their social media with made-up company policies. Grown men take responsibility for their actions. Brian said Randall couldn't force him to quit his job. Randall said he just did, and if Brian had a problem with it, he was welcome to call Tom back and try to explain why he should keep his job after missing multiple meetings and clearly having no focus or reliability. Marjorie jumped in and said they'd already discussed this on the drive over, and they were in complete agreement. Brian was moving back home, leaving his sales job, and starting work with the city sanitation department on Monday. He'd be picking up trash on the streets, cleaning public restrooms, emptying garbage cans in parks, whatever they needed. Brian said they couldn't be serious. Garbage collection? He went to college. He had a career. They couldn't make him pick up trash like he was doing community service. Randall said Brian should have thought about his career before spending his work hours taking shirtless gym selfies for Instagram and messaging women instead of actually doing his job. He said the sanitation position paid hourly minimum wage. The city would make sure Brian showed up on time every day with a supervisor watching him, and maybe some actual manual labor picking up other people's garbage would teach him the value of honest work and humility. I was just standing there watching this whole thing unfold and I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Watching Mr. Big Shot Instagram influencer find out he was about to spend his days collecting literal garbage was better than any revenge I could have planned myself. He tried arguing more, but Marjorie shut him down and said this wasn't a discussion. This was what was happening. She said he'd thrown away a good job and a good relationship for Instagram likes and attention from random women, and now he was going to spend his days cleaning up trash on street corners and emptying porta potties. Brian turned to me like I was going to defend him or say this was too harsh, but I just smiled and said his parents were being generous by finding him any job at all. I said honestly, picking up garbage seemed pretty fitting for someone who'd spent 6 months treating me like garbage online. He looked like I'd slapped him. He said I was a vindictive witch who was enjoying watching him suffer. I said damn right I was enjoying it, after reading him call me a pathetic ex and a deadbeat loser for 6 months while he posted thirst traps pretending to be single. I said watching him go from fake successful single guy to actual trash collector living with his parents was absolutely hilarious, and he deserved every second of it. Marjorie told us both to stop because arguing wasn't solving anything. She said Brian was leaving with them right now, period. He could stay in their guest room, work his sanitation job, and maybe after a few months of picking up garbage and cleaning public bathrooms, he'd learn some humility and understand what real work looked like. Brian tried one more time to argue that he could stay here and work things out with me, that we didn't need to break up over this, that making him work in garbage collection was humiliating and an overreaction. He actually had tears in his eyes talking about how his whole life was falling apart. I looked at him and said good. I said his life should fall apart because he'd built it on lies and fake Instagram posts. I said I hoped every single girl who'd been flirting with him on Instagram found out he was now living with his parents and collecting trash for minimum wage. I said maybe he could update his Instagram bio to single living with mom and dad professional garbage man. He called me cruel and heartless. I said no. Cruel was calling me an unemployed loser online for 6 months. Heartless was cropping me out of vacation photos and telling people I was his pathetic ex who wouldn't move out. I said he was just mad because his little fake life got exposed and now he had to face actual consequences. Randall cut in and said regardless of how we felt about each other, Brian needed to leave today. He said Brian would be reporting to the city sanitation department Monday morning at 5 a.m., and if he was even 5 minutes late or complained about the work, Randall would personally make sure he stayed in that position for a full year. It took another 30 minutes for Brian to gather all his immediate stuff. He kept looking at me like he expected me to feel sorry for him, but I just kept thinking about those Instagram comments and feeling zero sympathy. Finally, Randall picked up 2 of the duffel bags and told Brian to grab the rest and let's go. At the door, Brian turned around one last time and said I was going to regret this, that I was throwing away a good relationship because I couldn't handle him having a private social media account. He said I'd ruined his life by calling his parents, and now he was losing everything, his job, his apartment, his girlfriend, and he'd be spending his days picking up garbage because of me. I looked him dead in the eye and said the only thing I regretted was not finding out about his secret Instagram sooner so I could have dumped his lying butt months ago. I said have fun with your new career as a garbage man. Maybe you'll finally be doing work that matches your personality. Then I shut the door in his face. After they left, I literally did a happy dance in my apartment. Jillian came over that evening and I told her everything. The PowerPoint presentation, his parents showing up, Randall answering Tom's call and quitting Brian's job, telling Tom that Brian would be working sanitation now. We drank wine and laughed about how the Instagram king was now going to be the garbage king. The next few days were amazing. Brian started messaging me these long, pathetic paragraphs about how his parents had ruined his life, how he couldn't believe his own father had quit his job and signed him up to collect trash, how humiliating this was. Every message just made me laugh harder. Then he sent me a message saying he'd started his first day with sanitation, and it was absolutely degrading. He said he was literally picking up garbage off the streets in a bright orange city worker vest, cleaning public bathrooms that smelled horrible, emptying trash cans full of disgusting stuff. He said people from his old gym had already seen him in his work uniform and were definitely talking about it. I responded this time just to say, I hoped someone took a photo of him in his garbage man uniform and posted it online, so all those Instagram girls who thought he was so hot could see what he was really up to these days. I said maybe he should make a new Instagram account called Trash Collector Brian and post selfies with garbage bags. Then I blocked him on everything. A few days later, Marjorie sent me a message checking in. She said Brian was having a very hard time adjusting to his new reality. She said the first few days he came home exhausted and smelling like garbage and wouldn't stop complaining. She said he kept saying the work was beneath him and humiliating and everyone was laughing at him. She said she told him that's exactly the point. He needed to learn humility and what real work felt like after spending months pretending to be some successful player online. I told Marjorie I appreciated her taking him out of my apartment and holding him accountable. She said she was mortified by his behavior and the things he'd said about me online. She said they'd raised him better than that, and clearly he needed a serious reality check. She said the sanitation job would continue for at least 6 months no matter how much he complained. That was a week ago. According to his Instagram being gone and Marjorie's updates, Brian is still living with mommy and daddy, getting up at 4:30 a.m. to put on his orange safety vest and collect garbage all day, coming home smelling like trash and too tired to do anything but shower and sleep. The guy who called me an unemployed loser is now making minimum wage doing manual labor while I'm finishing my degree. The dude who said I was his pathetic ex who wouldn't move out is now living in his childhood bedroom with his parents because he couldn't handle being an adult. Some people in the comments said I went too far by calling his parents and that I'm being too happy about his situation. But you know what? He spent 6 months publicly humiliating me, calling me names, planning to cheat on me in my apartment, lying to my face every single day. And all I did was tell his parents the truth and let them handle their son however they wanted. If Brian's now picking up garbage for a living, that's not on me. That's on him for being a lying, cheating, manipulative jerk who couldn't keep his lies straight. His father decided he wasn't mature enough for an office job. His mother decided he needed to learn what real work was. I didn't make those decisions. His own behavior did. And yeah, I'm enjoying knowing that all those women he was trying to impress now know he's a garbage collector living with his parents. I'm enjoying the fact that Mr. Solo Adventures, and single and loving it, is actually hauling trash bags in 90-degree heat while I'm moving on with my actual life. My lease is up in 4 months and I'm definitely moving to a new place. Fresh start. Just me, my degree, 3 months away from done, my bookstore job, and zero tolerance for lying garbage men.